Thank you very much, and welcome to our regular council meeting of July 16th, 2024. We will call this meeting to order. Madam Clerk.
Be it resolved that this regular meeting now open at 6:30 p.m. moved by Councillor Bajelli, seconded by Councillor Shane.
All in favor? Motion is carried. Is there any opening remarks from members of council? Seeing none, I believe, go ahead, Mr.
Through the chair, I'd just like to take the opportunity to, as CEO, to introduce our newest staff member, Mr. Dan Cardinal. Dan was a senior provincial engagement coordinator with Skills Competencies Canada, Ontario for 8 years. Dan also has also been a training consultant and regional coordinator for employment services for La Cité College. And Dan has also held various career counseling and development officer and business development representative positions. His extensive experience and established relationships with external partners will be a considerable asset to support our local business owners and community in general. Dan is also fluently bilingual. Dan has a strong technical background with social media platforms, including Facebook and Instagram and LinkedIn, and perhaps some of council has already seen some of his posts. Dan's experience in the general field of economic development and employment services and his capacity to manage the township's professional presence on social media platforms will continue to maintain and enhance community trust in the township. So please help me formally welcome Dan to the staffing complement of North Stormont.
J'aimerais ça souhaiter la bienvenue. C'est beau d'avoir quelqu'un qui va pouvoir servir nos résidents dans les deux langues. So, as I was just saying, no, it's just good the fact that to be fluently bilingual, there is people in the municipality that like, in some cases, being served in their mother tongue language. So I think that's just a bonus for our residents. So welcome aboard. Thank you. Moving on to the adoption of the agenda.
Be it resolved that the agenda be approved as presented, moved by Councillor Bajelli, seconded by Deputy Mayor Densham.
Any questions or concerns with the agenda? Seeing none, all in favor? Motion is carried. Is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest or nature thereof? Seeing none. Moving on to there is no delegation, so going to item 5, the adoption of minutes of our previous meetings.
Be it resolved that the following minutes be approved as presented. Special meeting June 25th, zoning meeting June 25th. Densham, seconded by Councillor Bajelli.
Thank you. Any questions in regards to our previous meetings? Seeing none, all in favor? Motion is carried. Moving on to item 6, the adoption of minutes of our committees and local boards.
That the Council of the Township of North Stormont accept and approve the following committee minutes as presented. North Stormont Agricultural Committee minutes, January 10th, 2024. North Stormont Committee of Adjustment minutes, May 6th, 2024. Raisin Region Conservation Authority minutes, May 16th, 2024, for information purposes. Moved by Councillor Shane, seconded by Councillor Bajelli.
Thank you. Any questions on minutes from outside committees and boards? Seeing none, all in favor of the reports? Motion is carried. Moving on to receiving of our monthly staff reports and recommendations.
Be it resolved that the following monthly reports be received: CO school construction schedule, finance, fire, bylaw enforcement, building, planning, public works. Moved by Deputy Mayor Densham, seconded by Councillor McDonald.
Thank you. Or before I take questions, I'll make my own first comment is if anybody's driven by the school and there's trucks in the yard, there's actions going on. So I'm very pleased to see the starting of the end of our school discussions. And then pretty soon we'll be looking at moving into our new administrative building. So any questions in regards to the report? Go ahead, Deputy Mayor Densham.
Yeah, well, that's great news. And I'm just wondering whether or not the contractor could help with, a plan. Now, I know we were kind of taking that on internally in the past, and you've provided a school construction schedule. but if they can add any additional flavor to that report.
Through the chair, I did have a note on my, my agenda to indicate to council that I would likely defer these type of updates as rightfully I should, as the general contractor, Malin Construction, will be giving us updates through Andre and/or Blake. And I will certainly funnel that into the monthly reports as I have, but again, that information will just be regurgitated from the general contractor.
That's great. Thank you. Three other items, if you could, or?
Yeah, well, no, you carry on and then I can jump, so go ahead.
So Public Works report, it's actually not tied to the report per se, but we've had some community signs missing. I know Avonmore's been missing for quite a while, and I think Chrysler has a missing sign. I don't know what the plan is to replace the welcome to signs. When did they go up?
Last week.
Okay, good job. Awesome.
Nice.
It's good news.
Just on that note, before you carry on, so maybe, again, in that weekly, which I know we just started, but in that weekly, any good accomplishment to maybe list that as well is something that would avoid questions on that topic. So, no, that's.
And that's a perfect segue, because it was exactly, my next comment was I really like the weekly work plan update that we've been receiving. And at some point, it would be great if that can actually go up onto the website so people, the public can see what streets are being worked on or planned to be worked on a weekly basis. If council agrees, I think it would be, that was my intent. It's nice for council to know, but quite often council needs to know because the public wants to know. So if that's,
So we get it maybe in more detail, but I think just in the report of what's been done and what's coming on the monthly basis is kind of there. So I don't know if, are you looking at adding on to that? So
no, taking what we receive or an appropriate version of what we receive and putting it online, just so that people can say, work being done this week, so people see things that are going on streets or whatever, any level of detail that's comfortable and appropriate. And again, I'm not suggesting that right now. We may want to settle into receiving this report a few more weeks before we go down that path, but that's kind of the vision I would like to see.
you want to add to that?
Through the chair, I mean, transparency is what we're striving for. I don't see any reason why we can't post that. Certainly, our current SDG counterpart, Todd, I think would be amicable to doing that for us. And then, of course, it's going to transition to Dan. But yes, I think we can, there's no private information. It's just updates on what work plans the staff has the coming weeks. So I don't see any issues with that.
And I think before, I'm not sure if it's on the same subject. So I think with a summer student, and then we're looking at that role will be changed to an assistant that's been put into the plan budgeted for 2024. So, which is later on in the year, but that will maybe be an area where that assistant can be the one that just to format properly and put it online on a regular basis. So go ahead, Councillor McDonald.
Just two suggestions for consideration. One would be like, don't overpromise and underdeliver. So if there's things that maybe won't get done or you're not 100% sure, because people will hold you to it, like you said you'd do this and you didn't, and maybe more of a broad like summer construction schedule, not a weekly update, seems a little excessive, but like we're going to be working on these roads or whatever, but maybe a limited, really limited version would be good.
Whatever.
Through the chair, maybe this is a topic for discussion that we could evolve as we move through the summer season. We do have plans to do the hiring for the admin assistant, so when he or she starts for Public Works, maybe we can have more fulsome discussion on exactly what expectations council has, and of course you can hear from the community on exactly what they would like to see, and then we can, administration can bring that forward and we can meet community expectations.
That's a good idea from my perspective. I think we are thinking about a committee of the whole meeting. That might be, because again, this all falls under the umbrella of communication, but I think there's a appetite for how that plays out. We probably would be wise to have a conversation for sure. The last item I had was the aqua repairs on the Chrysler water tower. What was done specifically? I didn't see in the report what was actually repair?
It was warranty work from the major rehabilitation of the tower. For me to say right now, I'd have to go back and look at the notes. I didn't retain that. I know, communicating with Don, some of the stuff was eliminated, unnecessary work that wouldn't be profitable that we might have had, that they wanted us to pay for, so we just eliminated any extra costs because he said this code should have this, but example would be, they don't go up on the top of the tower, the operators, so there's no reason to have the fall arrest up there for them, because they don't go up there. But in a code, it says you should have the fall arrest, but then you hire a special company, come up and they have portable stuff and all this stuff. So we don't need the fixed items in there just because very seldom do we actually go up there under the township responsibility. It could be telecommunications or something, but we can get Don to give a full update on the what was done and
In round numbers, I had put the questions through Craig, and one part I think Don had answered was internally, so it had to be basically emptied for them to go and do more of it internal. So I don't know if Craig, if you want to add more to that.
I would request that I can send it out to council, and we can certainly touch on this on August 20th, because I don't want to misrepresent what our Aqua partners gave us. You're absolutely right. There was something done internally. I think it was touching up the paint, or I forget what the membrane is inside, but certainly it was something internally that had to be done, yes, as part of a maintenance program after the major work they did.
Thank you. Councillor McDonald.
For the planning update, I was just wondering where GE Reno's subdivision in Chrysler was at. Like, obviously, it's a very visual project right now, so a lot of people are excited, I think, and they just were wondering, like, what went in the ground and what's coming next. So just a general update on the status.
Yes, as of right now, we've done the foresting pre-servicing agreement. And we're, right now, the updates we're getting, I believe South Nation's looking at it right now, right, Peter?
Oh, sorry, yeah. So we're kind of into the final stages, I think, of the engineering review and through Aqua with some of the water details. Meanwhile, there's the pre-servicing agreement that they've started some of the work on, especially the sewer going back to the lagoon and some of the upgrades there. And then just visually, I guess they've started to put some of the, I think, stormwater pipes along. Water and sewer, yeah. Water and sewer, yeah.
Through the chair, yeah, there's ongoing dialogue as recently as today with both the developer engineers, our engineers, Blake, and our planning staff, and I did forward it to our fire chief because it was having to do with, I think it had to do with the fire hydrant today. So there's ongoing dialogues.
I will say, just with the amount of trucks and stuff coming out, as with every development project, this is not like news to anyone who works in development, but did see like kids trying to bike on the side of the road today, dump trucks going both ways, like mud flying off the trucks, and this little girl trying to bike, and I was like, oh my God. So like, I don't know what the plans are for the sidewalk and stuff like that, but that is still a huge need for Chrysler, and especially as more and more kids and families are coming in, it's scary watching people burn into town in these big vehicles, so made me nervous.
There has been some verbal discussions going on, something that maybe Peter get involved with respect to, I call it the island and stuff there, but that's something that maybe will, the discussions will have to take place with all the proper people in place, and maybe we can talk further on that, but again, it's with the developer that it starts with, and maybe we can get some discussions going on that note. So.
And they've been very good, like they're not driving fast and they're very quiet, and I'm not complaining about the noise or anything, but it's a lot of activity, so.
Well, just driving by the amount of trucks, of those big belly trucks there, it's pretty impressive to see in that big amount of dirt that they've got back there, so no, it's good just to see the evolution and things are moving along. So any discussions with our reports on that side? Councillor Bajelli, Shane, no? So with that said, on all our staff's report, all in favor of accepting the reports? Motion is carried. Moving to item 7.2, the RFQ Public Works 004-2024 for backup generators for water plant results.
That the Council of the Township of North Stormont receives report RFQ-PW-004-2024 backup generators for water plants and awards the quotation to Delhi Electric Limited in the amount of $325,228.80 plus HST. Moved by Councillor Shane, seconded by Deputy Mayor Densham.
So maybe Blake has an answer for me. So those size of generators, so what is it that they're, obviously just with the price, we're looking at for 3 generators. So we're not just looking at a Generac that's supporting power to the, so.
They're actually, because the system's on 600 volts, so you have to, it's industrial generators, is not residential or whatever. The one generator in Finch is going to be running the water plant plus the sewage plant number 2, which is in the parking lot by the tower. So that's a 125 kilowatt, and the other 2 are 60s. So I don't, I mean, they've all been engineered to what they have to spec, and we actually had, I think we had 6 tenders presented and 2 are disqualified.
And what are they running on? Is this diesel or is this gas?
This is diesel.
Diesel?
Yeah.
Through the chair, if I may inject, the application for this grant, and it's fantastic that we got it, was for 3 generators and a number 3 well in Moose Creek. It was suggested and authored by our Aqua counterparts, Emmy Hennessy.
Yes.
Hennessy was the lead on that, so this was a couple of years ago. We have until 2026 to utilize the funds, so I'm glad to see this moving forward.
Any questions? Go ahead, Councillor Bajelli.
Just a question really that kind of stood out to me was the overall cost of the project itself. The original estimated budgeting almost doubling the quote that we're actually going with. So just wondering, is this a matter of other work that's going to be coming up to bring it near that $650,000 mark? Or were we just really overestimating, in which case it's not really the best practice for our overall budget, where it's great that we're saving money, but are we misrepresenting projects, you know, in that sense?
Did that not include the wells?
Yeah. The overall project with the municipal funding would be $312,000. Right now, we just got word on the well. There was prospect of going to cost $450. We got a tender in for $300 to replace well number 3. But there is going to be contingencies because I don't think very much on the generators, but in that too is all the civil work is being done by the municipality. We're going to correspond and see if we want to charge for our in-house work. I know for sure other projects, what happens is we can actually recoup any outside costs we get. So doing a basically rough estimate of what the possibility is, giving leeway for the tax and leeway for any kind of issues that might come up with the tender, especially with the wells. I believe we're well safe to say we're going to be 100,000 less than what the project is, but I was already corresponding with the CEO that maybe we'll look at some of the other necessary work at the water plants if the funding can be redirected to upgrade some of the water plant instruments themselves. And we do have that in the capital budget under the Ontario, on the water and sewer system. So,
And if I can inject again to answer Councillor Bajelli's question specifically, the cost estimates were done by our Aqua experts. So we assumed they would be fairly accurate for the, were submitted based on our partners generating the expected costs. So they may be slightly off, you may be actually accurate. I don't know what the final outcome will be at the end of the day, when all three are installed and the well is in, but we could be a little bit under, as Blake has said.
So to your question, were you thinking that the 600?
That's it, because that 300,000 for the well read was not worked into that. How are we, I didn't want to see us overshooting or overestimating by, you know.
No, valid point. So with that being said, so the motion's on the table. Did we get a mover? Yeah. So are any further questions in regards to the generators? It's, again, anytime we get funding is always good. So all in favor of the motion? Motion is carried. Okay, moving on to our zoning bylaw for amendment 62-2024 for GNE Reno.
That the Council of the Township of North Stormont receives the planning report to change the zoning of vacant lots on Second Street Chrysler in the Township of North Stormont and approves the recommended changes therein. Moved by Councillor McDonald, seconded by Deputy Mayor Densham.
Thank you. So any questions in regards to the motion? Starting with Deputy Mayor Densham.
So we talked a little bit about this. It's very tight. And the fact that we're kind of reducing the parking spaces down to 1.2, in some instances, I guess I'm particularly sensitive to it, given the fact that we're right across the road from the fire hall. And my fear is parking on the road is going to potentially create issues for fire trucks moving. So I don't know if there's comments on how we're going to address that.
Through the chair, if I may, and Blake, you can interject and the fire chief can interject as well, but we anticipated the same potential problems. We are going to be suggesting that we make it a no parking area, and we would have to do parking enforcement if and when that, when the construction is completed. So yes, we were concerned about the exact same thing, but we will have safeguards in place to make sure nobody parks and inhibits ingress and egress from those fire trucks.
So we haven't done a lot of parking enforcement, have we, traditionally?
No, we have not. And it will be a sensitive topic from my experience. Yes, absolutely it will.
On that note, have we looked, directing at our fire chief, an actual fire route? Is that something like?
That's what we're planning on, sir. The entire road will become a fire route on that road. It's already problematic, so we're planning on changing all that.
No, I just struggle with the size of the building and the size of the lot. We absolutely need multi-unit housing. I think this is a fantastic addition in terms of housing for people in North Stormont. It's such a tight fit that, and a tight fit near the river, a tight fit near the fire hall. It just, like I say, we're trying to fit, a size 12 building into a size 10 shoe, and that's feeling uncomfortable for me.
And through the chair, if I can just interject, fire routes are typically private roads and they're based on the width. I just want to manage council's and staff's expectations and the public's expectations. We will have some mechanism of parking control on that street. I don't know if it will be a fire route because I don't know if we have the legal authority to make that a fire route. I want to look into that a little further. Ultimately, we can have no parking signs put up and those can be enforced. And hopefully those are a deterrent enough. So it's either fire route or no parking, but I suspect it will be no parking.
Further comments, Councillor McDonald?
Is there any other way, like, let's say there's a fire and Like, can they exit to the other side of the building? I've been in this firehouse so many freaking times, and I'm trying to remember if there's doors on the other side. There isn't.
There is, but it's a drive-through door only, sorry, through the
They
chair.
can't.
They can't. Well, no, they're gonna be backing out instead.
If
And then
there
if there's
was-
an event, we can't.
Just if there was an emergency. like-
Yeah.
You know, but they can go the other, like, they can turn.
They can
they
turn
can
the
go
other
on
way,
go to
yes,
the
yes.
hall.
And again, it
At
depends on
least
the
as a-
event.
Just as a, you
Yeah.
know, just, you
Yeah,
know.
they could.
Just wondering about that,
Yeah.
and then I wanted to clarify something in the H6 zone, because there was comments brought up from the public about the birds, and I know we don't zone for birds. I deeply know this in my profession, but there is a lot of wildlife there, and I saw something that I thought was beneficial. I want to be sure that I understand it properly. So it says additionally, the H6 zone provisions will limit vegetation removal that would affect the shoreline habitat. Am I reading it correctly that the shoreline habitat there will be left untouched completely? Up to whatever, and what would be the buffer that would be untouched?
The buffer ranges depending on the site. Sorry, I should have attached the site plan as well. In terms of the building, the closest corner is 11 meters, but most of it's 15 meters or greater. The hazard zones approximately 8 meters from the shoreline or greater in some areas.
And does it specify no vegetation removal, just to, I assume to
yes.
protect the geotechnical stability, it would say that? But-
Yeah, so we looked into what the official plan stated, and that was one of the recommendations from that, is to include in the actual zoning bylaw, like a vegetated buffer. So in the bylaw that's later on the agenda, it does include those provisions for all the hazard zone. You can see a map in the bylaw where it shows the distance from the shoreline. That's all hazard zone. And that's similar to other severances that have happened along the shoreline on the north or the south side of the South Nation.
Okay, great, and I think that's good from a hazard perspective and ecological perspective, hopefully, to just retain, it's, instead of cutting it down and trying to replant it and reestablish vegetation, if they can stake off that 8 meters and clearly show that they're staying away from it, it might help to allay some of the public concerns. So, thank you.
Thank you. Any questions on that side? Like I said, I appreciate it. So the report, when you look at both official plan or the provincial policies, I think it reflects where the need for housing in this type of model. Looking at the property itself, so we did get a delegation 2 meetings ago with concerns of the neighboring property and having the setback, which was reduced to 1.5. My comment to that is the property's the property, something will go. So if this unit is not approved, second option would automatically be semi-detached with supplement dwellings in the basement. So you'd be looking probably at least 4 units. And looking at the big picture, so it would and Peter, maybe you can clarify that, it would probably be brought forward, not be set up at the back if you're going to semi-detached with just a regular 6-meter driveway access to the property. And with that, the minimum zoning setback for a semi would be 1.2. So it'd actually be getting closer and in line with the existing house that's to the east. So I think it's either way, if it's approved or not, there is something that's going to be going on that piece of property. And from looking at it, I don't know if the fact that it's set back and having more parking area at the front, which would open up and not maybe interfere so much with the 2 dwellings versus having them side by side, and just because I believe the side yard from the previous, the adjoining property is actually very close to the line, so it would be quite clear. So I'm just kind of trying to see both sides of it. I understand there is people that are concerned, and I mean, if I was in their shoes, I would be looking at this as well and trying to identify what would be best. So having it set back, opening it up a little bit and not being versus having it brought forward and being more on the road in line with the other 2 is to be left for council to make a decision what's So I don't know, with that said, if there's any additional comments.
Just the comments that I would offer, there's definitely a need for multi-unit dwellings. We all know that. We are very limited within our villages of what our urban settlement area is. And I get it, if it was my property, I would be doing the same thing. In fact, I have a property that likely will be dealing with something like that down the road. But we really need to make the most of the urban development areas or settlement areas that we do have. So these units, as much as nobody wants it next to them, it's a necessity for people in our area and that are looking to move to our area for affordable housing that we're seeing across the board. So I'm empathetic, I understand their concerns. However, we have to look at the bigger picture on this.
Any further questions? Go ahead, Deputy Mayor Dencher.
So the bank down to the river, it doesn't have to be reinforced or any work. No, again, we talked about the fact that we're not removing vegetation, but at one point I wondered whether or not the bank had to be reinforced, which implies vegetation being removed at least.
Something like toe stabilization or something. That may be the case.
Sorry, I'm just pulling up the report. Didn't have it handy.
That's not uncommon with geotechnical setbacks to have some kind of mitigation or toe stabilization.
But that doesn't require the vegetation you were talking about to be removed in order to put the toe stabilization.
It was
So-
probably at the bottom of the slope.
Right now, sorry, if you're going down to the shoreline, there are kind of old rocks and kind of work that's taken place in the past, and I believe some of that is being enhanced again through the South Nation. Sorry, I'm just trying to double check the exact this right here. It's okay with council, I can, when it gets to the bylaw, I can just pull up the report, get the exact mitigation measures, but if Emil and I went down there with South Nation, with the developers, engineers, I think a third-party engineer as well, and we kind of all looked at some of the existing kind of rocks and fences and all that, that would still need to be restored right along the shoreline, and that would be through the South Nation permit process, not necessarily something for the township. That's kind of where it just drops off there.
But it's unlikely to significantly disturb the vegetation you were talking about.
That's correct, yeah.
That was really the heart of the.
Yeah, I think for the community, if that was all sort of ripped up and disturbed, there would be a lot of upset people. So that's something that I think we want to be really clear that that's going to remain in place, like vegetation as is, remain in place for 8 meters or whatever.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Perfect. Any further discussions? Seeing none. So this is just accepting the report. We're going to be coming to the bylaw a bit further down the agenda. So all in favor of the report? Motion is carried. Moving on to item 7.4, charitable donation policy.
That the Council of the Township of North Stormont receives report FIN 2024-13, introducing a charitable donations policy that will formally be adopted by bylaw, moved by Deputy Mayor Densham, seconded by Councillor McDonald.
Thank you. So Kim, do you want to just maybe give a outline of changes and comments to it before council's questions?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. We currently don't have a charitable donation policy, so this is more housekeeping than anything, and we do issue them. So we need to make sure we are following the Canadian Income Tax Act and the guidelines that they provide. So this is just a formality to ensure that we are following the guidelines in order to provide the charitable donations receipts.
And before the question, are you comfortable seeing that we're covering pretty much? I just don't like you pass a bylaw and a month later we feel like, oh, maybe we should have tweaked this, or are you comfortable with what's being presented?
I'm very comfortable because I've tried to fit absolutely everything you could possibly donate into this.
Okay. So for people listening in, we're accepting donation. Any questions, Deputy Mayor Densham?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you. So great. I love the fact that I see a lot of the cleanup and implementation, and I think it's really, really great that we're doing this type of work and getting stuff defined. Two questions though. I wasn't clear after reading it, what I think our best practice in terms of in-kind work. So there's often farmers who have a backhoe who will come and support some efforts. I don't know whether they've done it on municipal land or not, or they might, put in light posts for ball diamonds and stuff like that. Do we give receipts for in-kind work? It wasn't really clear on that, and have we in the past?
I have not seen any in the 2 years worth of files I've looked at for in-kind work, because people probably have not asked for a receipt for that.
Okay. But
That's all I
according to
can-
this policy, could we?
Yes.
Okay, so we can for whatever the fair market value is
Correct.
of that, okay. The second question, 9.1, accounting for donations for specific purposes. It says donations and requests for donations that are made for specific purposes will require council approval. So I'll give you a situation. Because I sit on South Nation board, every year I can donate $300 towards a cause, and a couple of times I've donated them to rec groups. So if I make that donation, it's then being donated for a specific purpose, or at least to a specific group. Does that have to come back to council for approval, or can I direct
I'm thinking it's more directed to newer projects, like we had the Moose Creek, memorial benches go in, we have a one for the flower boxes. As far as I'm aware, these were items that were brought forward to council at some point in time. So I'm assuming here that they were approved by council as one of the programs they wanted to see. So I'm thinking newer programs that come up, council should be aware of them and approve their purpose, right?
Okay, yeah, I just didn't, again, I don't mind if it does, it just can slow down the process if a donation has to come through the council process. So, but if something was directed like that, you could put that through without having to come to council. Is that right? Okay, great, thank you.
Any further questions? All good on the policy, so all in favor of the newly charitable donation policy? Motion is carried. Thank you. Moving on to 7.5, our debt management policy.
The Council of the Township of North Stormont receives report FIN 2024-14 regarding the introduction of a debt management policy that will be formally adopted by bylaw. Moved by Councillor McDonald, second by Deputy Mayor Densham.
Thank you. Again, Kim, would you like to give your comments?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. We currently don't have a debt management policy, and I think it's required because we have some major projects going on, and I think we need to be very clear on how we're trying to fund them and also be responsible for, like we have a debt, what's it called? A percentage that we're allowed to, ratio that we're supposed to follow. It has to be 25% of our revenues. And this policy is asking for that level not to go past 15%, because if we have something catastrophic, we still have monies to get some debt relief. I just think, I know I have a lot of policies and Miss Deputy Clerk is getting annoyed with me. But we have to cover ourselves. We have to be transparent in how we're handling taxpayers' monies, so.
No, and I believe good policy makes for similar to a fence makes good neighbors, so I will support that. Now, with comments on the debt management policy, where we mention about Infrastructure Ontario, which I think is where we lock in. It's just that there's the pros and cons. It's like everything else, it's a gamble, but I like the fact of possibly looking also at variable rates and at different options because of the situation that we're in. So I think it's just to identify where best fit is for our taxpayers and how we allocate, or similar to the which will be coming up for the new admin building. And with the fact that we have this building, it's just something that we'll have to sit down and just go through. Any thoughts on that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, this policy is basically to advise council that there's not only one option, that I will be looking at the best option for our buck. Infrastructure Ontario, although has lower rates, you're locked in, whereas with this crazy market right now, it may be wiser for us to look at short-term financing, hoping that interest rates go down and we can, lock them in later. Also with the potential sale of this structure, we can't apply that to the Infrastructure Ontario loan because it's locked in, whereas a shorter term, we could invest that money in the short term. When the term comes up, we slap it on the debt, and then you have less debt to deal with. So it just gives options and makes us transparent.
Go ahead, Councillor McDonald.
I'm really happy to see this policy. I think it's very important. And I was wondering, you were saying we're gonna set at 15% of our revenues. Do you know where we're at currently in terms of our debt against revenue?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Our debt limit is debt repayment limit is $1.9 million, and currently we are looking at 501,000. So we're well within that.
Okay. I'm really bad with numbers.
We're okay.
It sounds good and I trust you, but yeah, it'd be good to know.
We're at 25% of the 25% that we're allowed.
Okay, oh, that made it even more confusing, thank you. I have another question. In your assessment of the current debts that exist, and we see that schedule again with the budget, and for new councillors, it can be very overwhelming to look at these numbers. They're big numbers over long periods of time. I'm wondering if you've assessed the current debts, do any of them not meet these policies and procedures? And the one I was curious about was useful life. Like, do we have things we owe debt on that are currently, mortgaged? I'm using words I understand, over a period longer than what their useful life is. Like, are we currently, I think you know what I'm asking. I won't read
Through you, Mr. Mayor. We base our lending on useful life, and actually most lending institutions will not allow you to go past their useful life. So if I wanted to borrow for a pickup truck for 30 years, they'll say no, because the useful life is 10.
Okay, so currently the debts we have are within.
Yes, they are.
Okay, that's very good to know. And the last thing would be, anytime there's a report that deals with taking on a new debt, it would be great to just have a little commentary or review of your assessment against these policies, so that the policies don't sort of disappear from our memory. And you're doing a great job of that in your other reports. So just a comment that I'd love to see, like, and as per our debt policy, this meets whatever comments on that are appreciated.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we can always add it to the report under analysis, the analysis section in accordance to whatever.
It'd be nice to just remind us these policies and that you're checking them and that they exist.
Okay.
I believe that would be a common thread through the chair. I
Yeah,
think that
yeah.
was Kim's intention.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, Councillor Bajaj.
No, I'm very pleased to see something like this come through as well. Obviously, for me, debt management policy, the best kind of debt management policy is to be careful with what kind of debt we are accruing as a township. What I particularly like is lowering that limit, giving us that contingency of a 10% if anything were ever to happen. It's a fail-safe. It's a relief valve for us, where if that needed to change or we needed to tap in an emergency situation, that we would have to revisit this and amend the bylaw in order to do that. So it's really putting a safety valve on our finances in the case of, and every municipality in Ontario is struggling, wastewater, large-scale projects that are on the horizon that we may need to. So it's nice to have that financial security mechanism in place now. So happy to support this.
Any further questions? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion? Motion is carried. Thank you. Item 7.6 in regards to our variance report for second quarter.
The Council of the Township of North Stormont accepts the second quarter budget variance report ending June 30th, 2024 for information purposes only. Moved by Deputy Mayor Dencham, seconded by Councillor McDonald.
Thank you. Any questions regarding our, go ahead, Deputy Mayor Dencham.
No questions. It's a good report, and again, I really appreciate the commentary that leads up to it. The one thing that was pulled out was recreation, and the fact that I think it was Monkland was over on their hydro because they're using the building more, which is to be expected, and that's great. The one thing that I'm wondering whether or not we need to do, and maybe this will be directed to our future rec director when he starts, is just a friendly reminder once a year to all the recs that although the municipality in our current agreement agrees to agrees to pay utilities and stuff like that, it's still good for the people who are using the buildings to just check, before you leave, turn down the heat or turn down the air conditioning when you leave, these types of things, because at the end of the day, it's still an expense that the ratepayers pay, and if we can just kind of a friendly reminder each year to remind the rec groups, that they're not paying for utilities directly, but they still are as ratepayers. So, just a comment.
You sound like a dad.
Well,
There you go.
Google Nest is a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
well, we have a dad coming on board, a rec director coming on board that will, no, it's, on that note, when you're looking at saying that, the building's being used more, well, to me, whether you, like in the wintertime, you're heating the building, I think to turn the light on, it shouldn't be that big of a difference. The fact that they're using it more, you come in, so it's something I think that we should be prepared to say, okay, we're an ongoing community center and benefit if they use it less, but I don't like shortchanging when we're dealing with budget, saying, you know what, maybe we'll just use this, so that's something to look at budget. Councillor McDonald.
Will the school heating issue be resolved? Like, I'm assuming we're not just gonna pay 4 times more for heating this new building.
Through the chair, that was something we looked at prior to purchase, and we were aware that we had to change, as council is aware, one of the biggest expenses for this renovation is the HVAC, which in the long term, and Blake will be able to provide more input, but will save us money in the long run. Currently, it's baseboard heating, so it's quite expensive, but yes, we are going to be dealing with that with a technology-based HVAC system.
Hopefully we're at the worst of it, where we've gone through our winter, and by the time we get to the fall, we should be up and going with the new systems. So, any questions on that? I'm seeing none. All in favor of the variance report? Motion is carried. Item 7.7 in regards to revised council remuneration bylaw.
That the Council of the Township of North Stormont accepts report 2024-17 with recommendations for changes to bylaw 28-2024, being a bylaw setting remuneration expenses allowances for members of council. Moved by Councillor Jelly, second by Councillor Shane.
Thank you. So maybe I'll have Kim just kind of revert it. Never looks good when we're revisiting our own remuneration,
Yes.
but maybe you can clarify.
Through you,
it.
Mr. Mayor, this is not something that council brought forward, but something that I'm recommending. Because when council went to Toronto on a seminar, the cost of the hotels barely covered the daily limit, and it's not fair to have out-of-pocket expenses for attending a conference that you need to attend. So we've gone back to, the recommendation is basically a $200 per diem, and that is for meals and little incidentals. But hotels, travel, parking, and conference fees would be handled by the township with receipts for reimbursement. I didn't think it was fair that, okay, you might have had a $500 before, like the counties, but it's not enough. And I've actually had this conversation with the treasurer of the SDG counties as well, because I said it's not enough for some of the places they go. In some places it is, but if you're paying by receipt for a hotel and you're in Green Valley versus Ottawa, right? I mean, there's going to be a change.
And if I can support that for the rest of council, it is a fact that when you go up, whether it's by train or you drive, you get there, you pay for your hotel, and you've actually exhausted your expense account, and now you're paying out of pocket for your own food and stuff. I mean, it is, I still feel that the remuneration for the value of what council does when it gets to our expense account, I fully support what is being brought forward, but I will take questions from council, so go ahead,
Just one comment that I make, and we can all agree that the numbers that were there before were just not cutting it, or not covering what the actual expenses were. The one thing that still makes me a little uncomfortable, and I have no problem with the $200 per day, is the fact that receipts are not required for the per diem. And that, now that we're switching it where the hotels are being paid by the township, the fees are being paid by the township, the travel's being paid by the township, I only feel that I should be reimbursed for what I spent. And if I didn't spend $200, I shouldn't get $200. So I personally, and this is my personal thoughts, I have no problem providing receipts. If I decide to go over that 200, that's my personal choice, and I'm out of pocket. But if I'm only spending 110, I shouldn't be charging the taxpayers and taking $90 to pocket for myself. So the one change I would like to see is up to $200 with receipts provided.
If I can add before Kim, because I think I'm gonna say what you're gonna, it's just that we used to be that way, and when it came up where we are submitting our receipts, it makes a lot of administrative, so we all are well aware we cannot pay for our alcohol, is not part of our per diem, so it has to be removed, so there's a lot of work involved. So if, to come to a neutral balance, just to say, here's something that's, I don't know, what's the proper word, something that's equal to both sides, so we're not getting over money, but I'll make the statement, and I believe Deputy Mayor was with me and Councillor Shane. We went to supper across the road from the hotel in a little pasta, and you can get in there for a little pasta dish and you're spending $100 for your plate for you haven't had breakfast, you haven't had lunch, you haven't, so it is, it doesn't take long to.
I totally understand, and this is for accounting levels on all levels of government, even up to what I filed federally. It's not required, but we file those receipts for transparency reasons, because people still assume that we're pocketing money when we should be. So whether the per diem is $100, but we spend 150 or we spend 70, if I spend 70, I should get 70 back. I shouldn't get $100 back. That's just my personal.
Through the chair, if I can interject as CIO, I respect the accountability perspective of Councillor Bogelli. I think Kim will confirm or validate that it's very labor intensive for our finance staff to balance the receipts. I would actually say it's cost prohibitive. And I believe that there is a level of trust that the public has in our elected officials, and they're using these funds wisely. And so I believe we would leave it as is, but I will take direction, or the administration will take direction from council.
Just one final thought on it, and then I'm done on the matter. I don't think the onus should fall on staff. I think the onus should fall on us that are claiming that. I think we should produce our own reports, break it down, and provide the value to be paid out along with our receipts. I don't think staff should be breaking down tax, alcohol, that kind of thing. That the onus can fall on us. We only go to 2 conferences a year. I have no problem spending the 45 minutes to an hour it might take me to compile everything, put a report, give it to our staff but I'll leave it to council's decision, but that's.
Any comments on that, Councillor McDonald?
Yeah, I agree, and I think it's coming from working in public sector for my whole career, is that like there's a lot of accountability, so I'm used to that. I think what I would do if this passes as is for sure I would be submitting only what I had used, and I'd probably provide the documentation, just like, please reimburse me $117 or whatever it is, because that wasn't clear in there. It sounded like it was just a straight 200, and it wasn't really clear that you should be submitting only what you needed of that 200. So it almost reads that way, that you get $200 and do what you will. So I do think it's important because it's public funds, and these are the things that people do look at very closely, so.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. The reason this was brought up is if, for example, you're with a group of individuals and let's say you buy a bottle of wine for the table, your $200 plus your meal is going to be spent. If there is a glass of wine had with dinner, there's the tip that has to be taken off, then the GST, HST has to be readjusted, and it was being very labor intensive to the point that this is crazy. So that's why it's being brought forward this way. If council's uncomfortable with it, that's your decision for sure, but that's why it was done.
Deputy Mayor Densham.
I'm just wondering, to kind of address both of the issues, is it possible for a council member to submit a request and they can attach the receipts and you just take it at face value? They will ask for whatever they want, up to $200, and you only pay whatever they ask for. And it's up to them if this ever becomes an FOI or whatever to justify what they put on their report. Is that more manageable? Would that be easily manageable?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it's more manageable, but my, the reason for this was I didn't want council members to be out of pocket to begin with. So you get the 200 and you're taking care of your meals and things like that, rather than being reimbursed after the fact.
I'm comfortable with being reimbursed. I think we should.
Again, I hear what you're saying.
Yeah.
I've not worked in the public like you, but I can understand public hold us accountable.
I've always seen that it's not the $100,000 expense that the taxpayer freaks out, it's the $3 pack of gum. That's,
If I
I've
can
seen it
suggest.
countless times.
If I can suggest, as members of council, we do have our expenses, we can keep track of our receipts, get handed over to the finance department, but if it's under $200, I don't want the admin to go and start to analyze. So if I submit for 175 or submit for 195, it's the value of the 200 is there, and you submit what, and I think every member, it will be part of our remunerations that are publicly stated at the end of the year or at the beginning of March, what the remuneration for each, and including our expenses. So it will be there for you, but I don't want staff to go and start analyzing what you wrote on your report and start taking out the booze and readjusting HST and so on. So does that make sense, Kim?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I mean, if you want to, we can always change the policy. It's in draft at this point in time anyways. We can put it up to $200, and if you want to submit $70 or whatever, that's fine. But the real issue is whatever you submit, if there's anything that should not be submitted, it's a nightmare to take off and adjust. So even if there was 2 receipts for incidentals that you don't want to claim and incidentals you do want to claim, that would make our lives a whole lot easier too.
Okay, so the motion's on the table. What's the appetite for?
I think we're agreed that what we would prefer to do, and it sounds like council members are prepared to take the responsibility for it, is we request how much we wish, and we will we can choose to substantiate it. We can do you want to submit the receipts or whatever? You don't have to check it, validate it. You just have to give us back up to a limit of $200.
up to, that's the nice word. The
That's
addition of
right.
yeah.
So I will not get administrative or finance to review
No.
to, if it's under
Subject to
200.
face value.
That's fine.
Take it for face value. We will submit what we deem appropriate for our expenses. Does that make sense to members of council?
Yeah. And if a form can be just created to remind us, don't charge for that, just so you're getting consistently back from us exactly the same form as well, I think it'll be.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, even for myself, if I go on a conference and I want a glass of wine with dinner, I have my meal on one and I have my wine on the other, and then it makes life easier for reimbursement. Yes.
Yeah, the servers love it.
Yeah, exactly.
Some might frown on it, but it's,
And through the chair, if I could suggest, it's a minor but crucial change that council is suggesting, so I would suggest that council defer it currently, and then we can make the
Will this affect
necessary
AMO?
adjustments.
This
Will
is
it
just
affect
draft,
AMO
it's
though?
not even coming to this, had to have
Thank
so
you,
much.
disregard. Disregard.
so
Disregard.
this is a draft. So is it noted that you understand what we're, so if you can,
One other.
now it will attend, like for AMO, I guess it will not be in effect for AMO, so we'll still be the old way, because AMO's on the 20th, 21st, so I believe myself and Deputy Mayor Densham are attending for a delegation through the counties.
Next council meeting through the chair is August 20th, so it it may just be passed.
Regardless, we have something, so we're good, and then we'll bring it at the next. Good, so all in favor?
A different point. So on item 11, it talks about transportation cost reimbursement. And the wording is just a little bit ambiguous. So I'll paint a scenario, and I know this is not what you have in mind, but I just want to clarify this. Because right now it says maximum eligible transportation costs shall be the lesser of the per kilometer rate or any other method of travel. So, but the way it reads, technically, if I can find a train ride for $50, but I choose to drive and it's $200, I have to take the lesser, which is $50. Is that what the intent was? Is it,
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it is the intent.
and vice versa? If
You have
I,
to take the cheapest method.
well, I
The
can take a
only,
bus
all,
for $40.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'll tell you, I didn't follow this policy, sorry. It would have been cheaper for me to rent a car and pay for gas than the per kilometer rate.
Yes.
So that's to be considered too, right? The intent is to not cost the taxpayers, like, cost them as little as we can, but still make these conferences and things that are important to council to attend.
when you're saying about finding the lowest,
Yeah.
it's not a thing about finding the lowest. If you're saying, okay, I'm gonna take the train up, or the, so the train would not be 50, it would be more in line, but I'm just saying.
No, but right now it reads, we will only pay you the lowest of any method of travel. So that means that staff would have to research and say, well, if you take a bus, it's gonna be $34.
If you walk,
Yeah, well, but this is the thing. I don't understand then what's being specified here then.
Would you have a hotel room?
Yeah.
take a snowmobile.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I can wordsmith this and come up with something better.
But what was the intent? Was the intent to say, take your method of travel, but we're gonna max out at the per kilometer rate?
The intent was to, if you can get there by train at $100 to Toronto, or you can take your car and it's gonna cost the municipality $400. The intent was hopefully the train will be the method of transportation.
It's just, there's nothing here to specify how that's going to be determined, because even if you take the train, depending on when you book the train, if you book well enough in advance, you get a fairly significant discounted rate. The problem with that, though, and this happened to us in a past conference, is that we had to change our train because we only found out our delegation after. We ended up paying way more than what you would have paid had you paid for a flexible one. So it's so ambiguous. I'm not sure how much we're actually being, or what the rule is, how to calculate, okay, should I go here and here? What about this discounted rate, so on and so forth, so.
And I know sometimes what we would do at other jobs would be, you want to take your own car, but the train was 120, we'll reimburse 120. And you can take your own car, but you're not getting the per mileage rate. Because if the mileage rate, you can make money off that rate.
sure.
If you took your car from here to Toronto,
You're getting
it's a big
$550.
amount of
Yep.
cash. And if there's an easier way to get there, we want to incentivize people to take the cheaper option. So it's a difficult policy to write.
Yeah.
But I think the intent is like, if there's a cheaper option, you're only going to get that much money
But who
back.
defines the cheaper option?
Right,
This is what it comes
right.
down to. What is the
And
definition of?
For the
cheapest
record, and
option?
I'm sure
That's
it's
difficult.
everyone, well, I shouldn't say everyone, but I did that where I took my truck to I charge half the kilometers just because there's no way I was charging $500 to take my truck to,
Yeah.
so but I mean, that was on me to do so. So you say, okay, it was just 400 kilometers instead of 800 to drive to Toronto.
But you took your truck, but you brought Chuck with you, and
Yeah.
so you actually
Yeah.
charge half twice.
There's a lot of nuances. I don't know, Kim, how you can, there's,
Okay, thank you.
after being a manager for many years and staff asking me what they can and can't charge for things, and you're kind of doing a dance around basically what's reasonable and logical and fair, it's hard to write that out.
Through the chair, we will always try and embed every scenario, but there's always going to be these intricacies that we haven't, you
No,
know,
and what we had
expected.
what we had at Bell was you can travel by car if you want and get kilometer rate, or you can travel by train And if your trip is 3 hours or less, take economy. If it's 3 hours or more, you can take first class. So that was kind of the general.
Yeah.
You know, but anyhow,
SNC, you can't drive past
because
Kingston.
as soon as you start trying to calculate cost, it gets messy.
Yeah.
It gets messy.
So, Madam Treasurer, if you can bring back a report, next time will be, okay, so any further discussions? Seeing none, all in favor of? Yeah, so we're just accepting the draft and we gave direction, so we don't need to defer it. Back so you're clear on recommendation on what's been discussed, so all in favor? Motion is carried. Moving on to our municipal bylaw. Mr. Young, Peter, are you ready? Because if we go in, do you have what you need? Perfect. So we'll move on to municipal bylaw 8.1, bylaw number 62-2024 to amend zoning bylaw number 08-2014 for GE Reno.
Be it resolved that bylaw 62-2024, being a bylaw to change the zoning of certain lands in the township of North Stormont and amend the comprehensive zoning bylaw 08-2014 from institutional IN, residential first density R1, and hazard zone dash special exception 5, H5, to residential fourth density, special exception 3, R4-3, and hazard zone special exception 6, H6, be read a first, second, and third time, passed, signed, and sealed in open council the 16th day of July 2024. Moved by Councillor Shane, seconded by Councillor Vagelli.
Thank you. So that's in regards to the report we had earlier. So any further discussion on the bylaw? Seeing none, what was discussed, Peter, did you want to add?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sorry, just looked through the report, and what I was looking for is vegetation should be protected during construction. Any vegetation disturbed as a result of proposed development to be replaced as soon as possible. Vegetation not to be disturbed along the slope. So that's where the sentence I was looking for.
Does that answer the question that was brought up earlier? And one more time, any further question? Seeing none, all in favor of the report? Motion is carried. Item 8.2, so bylaw number 63-2024, charitable donation policy.
Be it resolved that bylaw number 63-2024, being a bylaw to adopt policy number FIN 012-2024, the charitable donations policy for the township of North Stormont, be read a first, second, and third time, passed, signed, and sealed in open council the 16th day of July 2024. Moved by Councillor Shane, seconded by Councillor Vagelli.
Thank you. Any further discussions? Seeing none, all in favor? Motion is carried. Moving on to unfinished business, 9.1, corrected committee minutes from the Committee of Adjustment, sorry.
We got this one first, debt
Oh,
management.
did I flip by?
Yeah.
Sorry, I flipped the page too quick.
Okay.
Sorry, 8.3, so the bylaw number 64-2024 in regards to debt management policy.
Be it resolved that bylaw number 64-2024, being a bylaw to adopt policy number FIN 014-2024, the debt management policy for the township of North Stormont, be read a first, second, and third time, passed, signed, and sealed in open council the 16th day of July 2024. Moved by Councillor Vagelli, seconded by Councillor Shane.
Thank you. Any questions? We are seeing none. All in favor? Motion is carried. See, I told you it was carried. Moving to unfinished business, corrected committee minutes from the Committee of Adjustment of April 2nd, 2024. So maybe Ann Mal, can you just?
Yes, there was just a typo. I forgot to change the names at the top. And then I looked back into who was at the meeting, just double checked my emails and everything, and it was corrected.
All in favor? Motion is carried. All right. What came first? Chicken and egg? 9.2, so backyard hens in North Stormont.
That the council of the township of North Stormont, that the Council of the Township of North Stormont directs staff to prepare a bylaw to permit backyard hens based on the recommendations outlined in the Backyard Hens in North Stormont report dated June 23rd, 2024. Moved by Councillor McDonald, seconded by Councillor Shane.
Who wants to start? Go ahead.
Why not? So this has been an interesting one. I guess I'll start to say, first and foremost, we don't have a chicken bylaw that permits chickens in the settlement areas right now. But we do. We have chickens and stuff, and we don't proactively enforce it. And I think I'm fine with that because it seems to work. I have chickens around my house. They don't bother me. I know why people have them, and some treat them as pets, some treat them for eggs, and it doesn't bother me. And I think about where this really started, at least for me anyhow, and it may have started in different areas as well for other, but first and foremost, this whole discussion started for me was people's neighbors, or some people who had chicken had roosters. And the neighbors were complaining because they didn't want to be woken up at 4:30 in the morning on a consistent basis. And that was an issue. The other issue was chickens getting out of individuals' yards and onto their neighbors' yards and making a big mess on their neighbor's yard. So from my perspective, you know, I tend to like to take it, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But there are a couple things that are broken here, which is the rooster and the wandering chickens. To me, what's being expressed here by the public are nuisance issues, not chicken issues. So why we have to build a whole chicken policy on this one, we don't have the resources, in my opinion, and I think staff has already said, with some of the suggestions in here in terms of doing inspections and doing pre-assessments, et cetera, I think our staff are already stretched far enough, and I don't see us having any advantage in getting a quick level of service just because everybody has so much to work on. So personally, I don't see a need for a chicken bylaw at this point. What I would love to see is added to our nuisance bylaw, some remediation for people who complain about roosters, and some remediation for people who complain about chickens on their yard making a mess from wherever it's coming from. I know we enforce noise because I know that there are neighborhoods who have noisy dogs, and it has been enforced. So to me, it's a nuisance issue. It's not a chicken issue. And so that's my thoughts.
Through the chair, if I can provide comment, and certainly our bylaw officer and Peter Young can provide comment as well. Valid comments, nuisance issues are definitely a consideration. The key issue here is that currently the zoning bylaw prohibits them in the settlement areas. I would suggest that council makes a determination if they want to change that and then build in nuisance I guess, tolerances or sections into our noise bylaw. I think that's what council or deputy mayor is suggesting. But right now it is prohibited. So I think we need to address that current issue and then how we are going to address, again, the rooster issues and the, it's almost like dogs at large, but these are chickens at large, and I'm not trying to be facetious, but that's in essence what we're dealing with. And the rooster issue as well, because the roosters are waking people up at 3:30 and 4 in the morning, and people are being, it's become a nuisance issue, correct?
Just to comment on that, and to be really precise, we've operated the way we've operated for many, many years. People have had chickens. I know COVID probably increased the chicken population to some degree. I'm not getting complaints about chickens. I'm getting complaints about roosters. I'm getting complaints about chickens making a mess on somebody's property who doesn't own them. So from my perspective, I don't see a need to have a chicken bylaw. We'll just continue as is, and if we want to address the rooster and the wandering chickens, deal with it as a nuisance, not a chicken bylaw.
And through the chair, I'll just inject, because we do have we're not introducing a bylaw. We have a bylaw in place that prohibits them. And
Any,
Yeah, so two hats. One hat, Charles and I both sit on the agriculture committee that was recently formed. And we did bring this to them at two different meetings. The feedback, generally they, as large-scale agricultural producers, they are not personally invested in the issue of people keeping a small number of hens in their backyard. However, they did voice a strong support for any of our poultry or like our egg laying and broilers, that if there was a farm industry that may be impacted by things like avian flu, they couldn't support allowing this bylaw to proceed. So we did have the staff bring a map forward, and I think one of the prime examples would be the egg facility. Is it Rocky Hill Farm? Which is 1 kilometer north of Chrysler. So what I understand is that if there were cases of avian flu detected in Chrysler, for example, as a result of backyard hens not being cared for appropriately or being dealt with appropriately, that would really negatively affect that farm business. And so it's just in that context that the Agricultural Committee did not support this, as it poses a risk to legitimate agricultural producers in our area. I think that is the only one that was identified, but it is very, very close to Chrysler and seriously would be affected. So that's the comments, I think, from the Ag Committee, unless I missed anything, Charles.
No, that's pretty much what came out of that. It wasn't an objection to it. It was the concerns for our large scale producers. They said it was mostly passed by the chickens sneezing onto wild birds or whatever, and how it got passed. We could shut those large producers, like completely lock them down for, I believe it was 12 weeks or something like that. It would be detrimental to them. I'm of the opinion, I don't want to tell people what they can have on their property. I fully support Deputy Mayor Densham, where I wish this was something we didn't have to discuss here and we could deal with just the nuisances that came up. And I think we wouldn't be having this discussion at all. It's mainly roosters, rodents, roaming chickens. We've read the comments from the surveys. We have so many residents that are exact opposite ends of the scales through the survey. I don't think any decision here is going to make everybody happy.
I'll jump in on this too. The problem with adopting a policy moving forward is basically we then endorse it and we own it. And if we endorse it and we own it, we need to enforce it. And that would put a huge strain on bylaw. The liabilities that could come in a case of avian flu, that could cost a farm countless dollars. I don't even think we've examined what the legal ramifications would be if then said farm came after the township for endorsing a policy like that led to loss of revenues for themselves. I think the problem now is we've cast a spotlight on the issue, and the fact of the matter is we have a bylaw in place that prohibits it. We just choose really not to police it or enforce it. In such cases as nuisance complaints, roosters, whatever it may be, maybe that's where now we need to start enforcing it a little bit. That would likely resolve those problems. That may, but again, it's we've now opened a can of worms. We've opened Pandora's box. We can't put it all back in. We are kind of closing right and say we have a policy, but we're not going to enforce it. But if we adopt a policy, we may have created a monster that we don't even have the capacity to govern.
And through the chair, I want to make sure I'm clear that council understands this, because we are not introducing any new regulation. It is already established, and it is you're actually correct. It is reactive. The challenge you have from an enforcement perspective, and we've seen this escalate in certain village areas, is people can make complaints. Then we have a duty and responsibility to investigate and enforce. So if we have one complaint, and I've seen this many, many times, well, I have chickens, why can Tom, Dick, and Harry have chickens as well? Why aren't you enforcing it there? We are reactive, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, then they will go and they will start calling on their neighbors because they feel compelled to do so because they are being held to task. So I just wanted to be very clear that if council, and again, administration is here to support council's decision, but if this is the route that we want to go, we first have to deal with the current restriction, and it's a clear and strict restriction for villages. So if we want to provide some flexibility, then we have to speak to the zoning limitation right now. And I'll ask the planner to respond to this, but I think the first key component of this is whether we want to review and modify the current zoning provisions. Is that accurate?
Yeah, so we got, through the mayor, we did get direction from council to consult the public on whether they would want a backyard chicken policy. And I think, as brought up a couple times, it's very polarizing topic. This has been brought up in, I know, South Glengarry, South Stormont, South Dundas, and it came to the exact same conclusion at the end that there's so many people that are in favor, so many people against. Let's stick with the status quo. I think we got a really good flavor of where everyone was coming from in the public and where some of the comments were coming from as well. But I think if council's direction is to continue with the existing policy, which is an alternative one, then it would just be in the areas outside the hamlet, and we would not make any change to the zoning bylaw. If council wanted us to amend the zoning bylaw, then we'd look at the recommendations in the report, which were just for bigger lots and some limits on the number of chickens and things like that, no roosters. But ultimately, there's a couple of municipalities in Russell Nation Champlain, that did go forward. But there's plenty of municipalities that looked at all the pros and cons. What's the local context? Where's the chicken producers in the industry? And they went with to not proceed and stick with the status quo, which would be alternative one. And that we can definitely continue with that.
Don't know if that's clear.
Yeah, I'm mostly looking at this from a practical perspective. Like I say, we've always had chickens in the settlement areas as long as I've lived here. And I think our way of addressing complaints on a reactive basis, like we don't have unlimited resources. There's a lot, it's not just chickens, there's a lot of things that we enforce on a reactive basis simply because we're a small municipality with very limited resources. And I think practically that's exactly the way it has worked out. One of the other key messages that came out, to me anyhow, in the report was, and it sounds rude, but I take that face value, get your nose out of our business, right? That's kind of the message that many of the residents were kind of saying, which is basically how North Stormont has operated up to this date, and it's worked. Like we're a tight community, we're a good community. I love living in this community. And again, I think part of the thing is that neighbors talk to neighbors, and quite often neighbors work out an agreement that works between them. It doesn't always work out, but I'm going to suggest that most of the time it does. And again, given that, I'm looking at it mostly from a practical perspective. We don't have the resources. I don't want to ramp up. Like you've stated correctly a number of times, we already say in our current bylaw that we can't have them. I'm not asking for us to ramp up enforcement. We don't have the resources to do that. Deal with it on a per issue basis. And again, the two issues that maybe I was misunderstood when this whole thing started down this path was, in order to enforce roosters and wandering chickens, we would have to come up with a whole big chicken bylaw. And I didn't understand it at the time, but if we can simply address those two things by putting them in a nuisance, calling them out in the nuisance bylaw, so that it gives our bylaw officers something that they can deal with those two particular issues, I think that's going to answer 99% of the complaints that we get, I believe.
If I can inject, and I apologize to Councillor McDonald, but the frustration from administration is that's why we're exactly where we're at right now discussing this, is because We have a bylaw in place. We had complaints about nuisance issues. We have remedy under the zoning bylaw. Now, again, it's very strict and all-encompassing. But the point is that the whole reason why we're here is because we had complaints about what I would call bad behavior on some negligent chicken owners. I agree with the deputy mayor. Most people are very responsible, just like most dog owners are very responsible. But in this case, we had complaints. We were trying to action them. And this escalated to the political scope. And that's how we've come to this path where we did go down the route of soliciting public input. And we've come to the conclusion, or we've come forward with a potential solution to this issue. But that's where we started down this path. So I don't know if we're going to get anywhere with this approach, and I'm trying to be respectful, but be honest. I have a lot of enforcement experience, and I do think that if council wants to make a change, they have to make a change in the current regulatory framework.
And if you look at the complaints, we hear the complaints, and what we do is we turn around and we tell the administration, we got a complaint, and we're not right now giving you the right tools to address it. People, often you get the comment where they're saying municipal government or any government should be staying out of my business. My property is my property. And the issue is we're trying to stay out of everybody's business. But when we get a complaint from next door or next, it now becomes our business. And that's where we have to, so what we have as far as the bylaw that's in place now, as you mentioned, we can try to remedy that one particular case, but then if it doesn't meet they'll look at everywhere else, and everybody knows everybody, so you know who has them, who doesn't, and then it falls in how you address it. If you allow one because there was no complaints next door, but you're not allowing him because somebody is so we have to, and I don't know, to be honest, the solution of and just before I go, in regards to the Ag Committee, the comments that came back with the big producers, I fully support. The only thing is right now our bylaw is looking at the settlement areas, and which Rocky Hill is a kilometer away, so maybe there could be potential, but the ones that we have in North Stormont often are in the rural areas, and you can have somebody that's got a 2-acre parcel that have chickens that are 1 kilometer away from so we cannot, like, this bylaw would be very hard to try to.
Right. And through the chair, I tried to encompass all of these pieces so council could make an educated decision. And administration, again, is here to support council, and I believe council's position is to allow chickens in village settlement areas with control measures. In order to do that, we have to rescind the zoning provision that prohibits them in the village settlement areas. I believe that is a crucial piece to this puzzle that needs to be done. And then we bring forward nuisance controls in the applicable bylaw to deal with these. That is my suggestion to council.
Go ahead, Councilor McDonald.
I was gonna say the same, Craig, like, I think what everyone's saying is that we don't have an issue with people keeping chickens when they don't make a nuisance for their neighbors. We don't want to be in anyone else's business, like, generally, other than the large producers issue. And I think what happens for Nancy, and if she's responding, is like, right now, she can't just deal with the rooster or the traveling chickens. She has to say, all your birds gotta go. And like, that's not the outcome we want either. So we're really stuck. Like, this sucks. This is a really crappy, so I would support it in a pilot sense. I'm so worried that if we say they're permitted, our issues are just gonna go through the roof. I think there'll be a lot of irresponsible owners. I think there'll be a lot of problems. I think there's a lot of people don't know what they're getting into, a lot of mistakes. How many times is it gonna take them to properly construct a coop? I can think of a million issues with this, but I don't think we wanna restrict people's ability to use their property if their property is large enough, if they house things properly. Like, that's where I'm at personally. I don't want to see licensing and a bunch of paperwork and a bunch of registrations and visits. I want nuisance response. That's my priority is
Can
nuisance.
you identify the nuisance part? So if I don't abide by the rules and we're allowed chickens, I don't abide by the rules. Is there a way where our bylaw can set in and say, okay, you didn't do this, they were not cooped, they were not fenced in, so they're all over the place, that we can now restrict that?
Again, through the chair, I want to make sure that administration can support the community's expectations and what the community wants. You represent the community. If the community wants to have chickens in village settlement areas, let's make it allowable in our zoning bylaw first. I don't want to also set up our enforcement staff for failure, which quite frankly, we have to date. Nancy Ann is in a very compromised position where she has to try and enforce the zoning bylaw that was passed by council, yet she's being asked not to because of community pressure. So let's remove that and make sure that she can enforce potentially nuisance issues that I believe we can set up in a bylaw to try and, I mean, you're always going to have situations where it falls outside the scope of the bylaw, but we can certainly try to minimize that. Roosters would not be permitted anyway, from what I can tell, and what I think the community's expectations are. Laying chickens would be permitted if that's council's desire. Roosters would still not be permitted, and quite frankly, you don't need a rooster to have hens laying eggs. So we could eliminate at least that noise issue. But I do think there's an approach that we can allow council to allow the chickens and deal with the nuisance issues. We do it with noise and barking dogs. We can certainly do it here. I just, again, want to make sure that we do this appropriately and we give Nancy Ann the tools to enforce when she needs to enforce, and we don't put her in a compromised position, or council for that matter.
Councilor Bajal.
You, Mr. Chair, you made a statement that kind of resounded a little bit on how we might be able to address this. And you said one of the key components before moving forward is having to rescind the current bylaw. If we rescinded the current bylaw, but chose not to replace it with a new one, just rescinded the current one which prohibits it without giving a blanket approval of a new one, amended current nuisance bylaws to include things like roosters or animals being on property without touching the rest of it, could we not solve this problem of the nuisance, rescind the actual bylaw where we prevent neighbors from calling on neighbors saying, get rid of their chickens, get rid of their chickens,
That's
get rid of their chickens?
exactly what I'm suggesting, yes.
I think we don't need to create a policy. I think we just need to rescind and rework the current nuisance without touching the rest of the issue.
Through the chair, but as this discussion evolves, I do think that Peter or Anmal should inject from a zoning and planning perspective.
Sorry, we're just pulling up the way that our current bylaws worded. But generally, zoning bylaws are worded in that you are only allowed to do, you can't do anything on your property except the following uses, which in a hamlet would be residential and maybe a home-based business. And then for the backyard chickens or hens, it says on lot zoned agricultural or rural backyard chickens shall be permitted under blank, here's all the conditions. So it's more, the default is that you aren't allowed to use the land except for the uses that are listed in the bylaw. And then here's, your setbacks, maybe your maximum size. So the default is you can't have chickens unless it says you're an agricultural zone that permits it, you're a rural zone that permits it. So it's usually worded the other way around.
So through the chair, could we not inject that into that section where residential properties are included to allow the hens to be on those properties?
If we did that, but that's sort of the recommendations in the report is that it would be, let's say, on any lands, backyard chicken shall be permitted based on this, and this. So the way it's framed is a little bit different than that. It's only permitted if you explicitly say in the bylaw, you're allowed to do this. If it doesn't say you're allowed to do it in the bylaw, you're not allowed to do it.
So are you referencing to Councillor Bajali as far as just rescinding and then leave it? We have to rescind.
You actually have to add, I suppose.
Yeah, it's more of a pause or a positive statement. You're not allowed to do this. The default is you're not allowed to do this, but you are allowed to do it if you're desisting this. I mean, we could leave it completely silent, but I think there are some good provisions, such as the roosters, the maximum amount of hens, the setbacks that are all in the bylaw right now. We could go back and kind of think about it, but just the way usually we're wording a bylaw, it's you only permit chickens if you explicitly say they're allowed. And if they're not, you don't say that, they're not allowed.
So can you see what the appetite of council is? Like is it something that you think you could amend to satisfy what the discussion around this table is, or?
Certainly with Nancy Ann and Craig's input, we could go back and relook at that. Sorry.
Sorry, I do have a number of hens concerned, obviously, and if they're, located in apartments and stuff like that. So I would like to have some sense of guidance towards that. Whether I'm for or against is not the point here, is that if I can't just go on a property and not say you're allowed to do this, but not, it's restrictive. But I would like to see, as the rural section says, you have to have a coop, you have to have a certain amount. The roosters are not allowed on rural areas as well. I would like to see some of these in, like the number of hens that council is looking for. I mean, that would be the only, there's a certain criteria I would love to see, but that's up to council again. But that's what's written, the way it's written in the rural area as well. So if we're removing it from the rural, the residential portion.
And
That-
through the
those are my
chair,
concerns.
I think council's appetite is, again, we still have to allow them in the village settlement areas. I'll leave it to council to direct whether we leave it as part of the zoning provisions, or we can embed. Through the nuisance issues, we still can adapt our current animal control and noise bylaws to embed it in there as well, as I've said. Certainly Peter has a more complex limitation through the zoning suggestions. Does council want to restrict it to certain properties? It's a very complex issue.
Peter might, go ahead, Peter.
We could go back and just approach it from a nuisance perspective as well, as I think Deputy Mayor Densham brought up. And there's a bit more in terms of tickets and enforcement. If you're going through zoning, all that, and you're laying charges, it's a lot harder to do. But we could maybe go back and see if through the nuisance bylaw, again, maybe change what we have in zoning and have more in the municipal act bylaw, which you have a lot more power than in a zoning bylaw.
And I will inject about enforcement. Under the Planning Act, you can only issue Part 3s. There's no set fines, if you will, or tickets. So it is a longer process to do enforcement. So as Peter said, if we adopt it in our existing animal or noise bylaws, or we create another bylaw under the Municipal Act, you can set fines that are a much quicker enforcement process. Hopefully it's a deterrent. But right now, under planning, in any municipality, if somebody is in violation, you issue a notice of violation for a certain compliance date. If they don't comply, you have to issue a Part 3 summons.
So there's a few areas where, like I say, the number, I don't see, we still like to have, I don't want to have somebody with 20 chickens. So I'm not sure what how we're changing and what we're changing is the part where we'll have to revisit it. Go ahead.
Well, I really have a hard time with a number because, again, in my opinion, it's going to become an enforcement snowball, where you say, okay, well, you can only have 6 chickens and you have 8. Okay, but my neighbor down here, he has 10, but he didn't start the original complaint. Now, because this neighbor complains and wants to drive you down to 6, now we go, well, yeah, but you're letting them. Well, it's not that I'm not letting them, we haven't got a complaint. The whole thing just creates, I realize that it's much easier to, I don't want to say to enforce. I think it's going to be way more complicated to enforce, even though it's easier to digest in terms of at face level. I just think it's going to create the nightmare that we're actually trying to avoid on this, is that
And through the chair, the CAO did indicate that in some of the documentation that I sent to council to digest, that absolutely there is going to be enforcement implications if this is permitted. And if we put certain limitations or certain constraints, numbers and size of lot, there will be an enforcement impact. Absolutely, there will be.
If you're looking at an apartment building, for example, now you're multiple, well, it's my backyard, just like your backyard, I don't want the chicken, like, then how do we, so there's a lot at stake for the enforcement part of it.
Yeah, the problem is we need to remove the arbitrary aspect of it as much as possible and address the issue that the public are dealing with. And the number is arbitrary. Council picked 6. Well, why didn't they pick 8? Well, they could have. Well, let's change it to 8. And that's the arbitrary piece to it. Whereas fundamentally, what we're trying to do is to say, if you are causing a problem to your neighbor, that's my first one. If you're causing a problem to your neighbor, I want to give you the tools to be able to go and address the neighborly issue. Now, there's other things that are bigger, and I think we got to get a handle on that first before we even start talking about, well, what about cruelty to animals and stuff like that? I guess it's the same as if you're cruel to your dog. And what's the definition of cruel? Is the pen size not right? That's where it gets really, really complicated. And that's what I'm trying to avoid, is just entering into a snowball effect on this. So again, I kind of like the idea, although I think you're saying we can't remove that clause from it. But I did like the idea, and then just reinforce the nuisance control.
Well, I'm gonna get 50 meat birds, and so, like, I mean, there's a lot, that's why I don't know if the number is because nobody's stopping it from saying, oh, I'm gonna, hey, you want, I've got, and you raise your chicken to turn around and sell them. I don't.
But I really like the idea that Peter's mentioned too about focusing on the nuisance side of it. If we can focus on the nuisance side of it, create that actually has some teeth, that in itself may solve the problem, where we're not having to talk about numbers and group sizes and everything like that. We can leave well enough alone, but embed into the nuisance areas some real teeth, some real tangible reason where a neighbor's gonna say, oh, well, maybe I shouldn't get a rooster because it's gonna cost me a $300 ticket. That, I think, is gonna be more effective than us trying to over-regulate this thing to death.
And I think what, sorry, you didn't.
Go ahead.
Just jump. I think what you're describing is the difficulty of doing bylaw. And this is not unique to this issue. Difficulty of doing bylaws and building code. Like, the firewall has to be this thickness. Well, what's the difference 1 inch, 2 inch in planning? Who cares what side of my lot line? Whatever. I think we have to give the staff some direction, and I also agree with Councilor Pacelli that the nuisance bylaw teeth is the way to go, I think. But I do know that the staff will need some limits, right? Like, if they have 20 and 20 is an issue for the neighbor, she needs to say, it's 10 only, sir. And that, like, she can't say, I'm gonna choose today because you pissed off your neighbor that it's 12. Like, so I think that's gonna be a struggle. But I would appreciate the staff's suggestions on what limits they feel they can enforce, and through their experience and yours as well, the CAO. Because I know that without these specific limitations and descriptions, that you're not gonna be able to do your job. So that's my 2 cents.
So I believe, if I can get some clarification, the flavor of the community and council is that we have broad allowances for chickens in settlement areas. We will try and bring back nuisance issues that deal with very limited issues, such as, say, chickens at large, or same as dogs at large. And we will continue with the restriction on hens in village settlement areas. Peter would have to add in, or Anmal would have to add in to our zoning bylaw, that residential properties do permit chickens on the property. There wouldn't be any setbacks or lot limitations, as was suggested. So it would be a very broad, I will leave it to the discretion of our planning experts to determine how we word that, but it would be just very open-ended, and that we try and build in some nuisance control measures. Nancy and I can work on that. Have I captured that accurately?
They may want to set a lot size limit, though. That, I don't want to take that off the table. I'd like them to suggest something and we can debate it, but I don't think an apartment deck should.
And again, I'm
That's-
at the
that's just
discretion
a
of council.
They're all good suggestions, it's just from an enforcement and that's my biggest concern. And again, I understand the number, like the idea of having a number of chickens, but my suggestion is focus on what the true complaint is. The neighbor isn't complaining because you have 8 chickens or because you have 12 chickens. They're attracting rats, right? Or they're making too much noise, or they're getting onto my property. Focus on what it is that the residents are actually complaining about, and see if we can't wrap language around those things, rather than, like I say, and I get your point about building and stuff like that. Having tangible, objective numbers is always easier to do. But I think what I'm hearing anyhow from the public is, if you're bothering me, stop bothering me. And so whatever that is, if we can figure out what are the major complaints and can we wrap language around it, that's my 2 cents.
And I just want to know what the tools are that they
Yeah.
need to do that, because it doesn't mean Nancy Ann drives by and sees, oh, they have 9 birds today, I'm gonna stop by and take one of their birds, and it doesn't even mean if you had a complaint and they were over the birds that you deal with it, you deal with just the complaint. Like, there's a level of trust in how you do the enforcement. What tools do you need to respond to the complaints that we've had in the community? So let us know.
And again, I think there's mechanisms that we can embed in the nuisance bylaw that will address many of these issues. The vermin issue, I will caution the best kept chickens. If you have chickens and you have a coop, in all likelihood, there are going to be more fox, there's going to be more rats, there's going to be more animals in the vicinity, even in a well-kept coop. So I just want to make sure that the community and council understand that there's certain issues that we can't control, at least from a regulatory perspective.
Okay, so I'll just get Nancy.
I just want to add one thing,
Yeah.
and I know the numbers are a problem for you, Deputy, but just, we have to understand, if we take the numbers out, we're going to be looking at other bylaws and the upcoming bylaws where numbers are big, the number of dogs, the number of this, that are limited. So I just want to make sure that it doesn't cause any more problems as well in the future, because we are bringing that bylaw in as well, and we are going to be changing some of those limits, but everything is numbers. So in a rural area, it does have a limit as well. So we'll be looking at that as well. So we're bringing all the information to you, and it'll be up to you too. But that's my
But
concern.
the emphasis of
Yeah.
nuisance.
And bylaw,
Keith, I think is
yeah.
gonna be.
That's where we're going to go.
And again, I'm only one person, and
No,
I've
I-
expressed my feelings, so I think all options should be considered, and council will decide together.
Perfect.
Good, so I think we've discussed it enough. Wasn't there a pig in, is it Berwick or Chrysler one time that's for next meeting? Okay, so the report is on the table, all in favor of the directions that we gave.
Yeah.
And they're preparing under our recommendation, so I think it'll be coming back to us, but we're accepting the motion as it stands.
I think it's flexible enough that we can take council direction as is.
Perfect. Thank you. So all in favor? Motion is carried. New business, or there's no new business, so moving on to motion and notices of motions, 11.1.
Whereas the state of healthcare in Ontario is in crisis, with 2.3 million Ontarians lacking access to a family doctor, emergency room closures across the province, patients being derostered, and 40% of family doctors considering retirement over the next 5 years. And whereas it's becoming increasingly challenging to attract and retain an adequate healthcare workforce throughout the healthcare sectors across Ontario. And whereas the Ontario municipal governments play an integral role in the healthcare system through responsibilities in public health, long-term care, paramedicine, and other investments. And whereas the percentage of family physicians practicing comprehensive family medicine has declined from 77 in 2008 to 65% in 2022. And whereas per capita healthcare spending in Ontario is the lowest of all provinces in Canada. And whereas a robust workforce developed through a provincial sector-wide health human resources strategy would significantly improve access to health services across the province. Now therefore be it resolved that Council of the Township of North Stormont urge the province of Ontario to recognize the physician shortage in North Stormont and Ontario, to fund healthcare appropriately and ensure every Ontarian has access to physician care. And further, that a copy of this resolution be forwarded to the Honorable Doug Ford, Premier of Ontario, the Honorable Sylvia Jones, Minister of Health, the Honorable Nolan Quinn, MPP for Stormont, Dundas, South Glengarry, Kimberly Moran, CEO of the Ontario Medical Association, and Colin Best, President of the Association of Municipalities of Ontario. Moved by Councillor Shane, seconded by Councillor McDonald.
Thank you. Any comments that I think every municipality should be looking at this one? So all in favor of the motion? Motion is carried. Moving on to correspondence, item 12.1 to 12.7.
Be it resolved that the correspondence as listed as items 12.1 to 12.7 on the agenda be received. Moved by Councillor Shane, second by Councillor McDonald.
Any questions in regard to our correspondence? Seeing none, all in favor? Motion is carried. Moving on to the scheduling of our next meeting. So we have our quarter revision, which will be next Monday, July 22nd, 2024 at 5:30. We have our regular council meeting, which will be held on August 20th, 2024 at 6:30. And again, there's only one council meeting in August, and then we fall to September 10th, 2024. For the coming events, thanks to our deputy clerk, so we do have an info session that was sent out, I believe, to, maybe I can let you,
Yeah, through the chair. So in consultation with the AGCO, we have been able to set up two sessions, a session for all the organizations and groups that wish to partake in lottery or are partaking in lottery that have questions and concerns. This has been forwarded to SDG counties and all the SDNG municipalities. It has also been forwarded, thanks to our recreation director. It has been forwarded to our neighbors in Champlain, Castleman, that whole area. It's also been sent to Cornwall area. So far to date, I have, for our municipal session, which is the following day, we have quite an interest, and I've had quite a few people inquiring about this event. So I think it would be good for people to come. I know that sometimes when they listen, they don't always say, well, yeah, but can't we do this? But now I think it's their opportunity to hear from the people that make the legislation. And perhaps they can have a better understanding with lotteries. So it has been out there. It's on our Facebook page, the website, and it is getting some likes. So hopefully we'll get a good turnout. It can be done by Zoom and in person. And it's September 19th from 7 to 9 p.m. At the Moose Creek Recreation Center. And I think maybe our CAO can.
No, I think we've maximized the exposure, and thank you to Leanne. It was a lot of work, and I think it's long overdue, and it's fairly rare that they have these in-person training sessions. So I think this is a fantastic opportunity. And again, councils are encouraged to go to the public session.
no, and often when we get, I'll just acknowledge you, often when we get comment from the public, they get frustrated with our municipal staff stating that, it's all on us. We are mandated to follow the OLG format, which sometimes even ourselves won't agree. It's kind of that thing where, why don't you let us do? But it's still under our clerk's supervision that she has to follow the law, and it just sometimes this will rectify and show the people. So it's good for organization groups to attend and really see how the province has it laid out for all of us. So maybe Steve, if you want to add to that.
Yeah, congratulations. I think it's a great initiative, and I've seen only good comments online so far about response, and so I think you're going to get a really good turnout. I hope you do, and you may want to just do another surge online just a week before to remind people of the event, because like I say, I think it's a really, really good initiative.
Go ahead, Councillor.
Just another public event. I'd like to invite everybody this Sunday, if anyone's looking for something to do, between 1 and 3 at the Lost Villages Park. We'll be hosting an annual MPP picnic. Great entertainment for the kids. Last year we had almost 700 people come through, so expect another really good day. So if anyone from North Toronto wants to make the drive down to the Lost Villages Park in Long Sault, that's between 1 and 3 on Sunday.
If I can promote, so Avonmore is having their fair this weekend, and it is our local, one of two in Stormont County, but it's our local North Stormont fair. So I think they're calling for beautiful weather. So if anybody's looking for something to do, please go and participate in the Avonmore Fair.
If anybody wants to work the gate, I'm on Saturday 3 to 5, so if anybody wants to help. No, everybody's looking away.
How much wrong change I gave up last night? Probably
Enough so that you did not get the call back? So there's no closed session, so let's move into our ratification bylaw.
Be it resolved that bylaw number 65-2024, being a bylaw to adopt, confirm, and ratify council's actions at its regular meeting of July 16, 2024, be read a first, second, and third time, passed, signed, and sealed in open council the 16th day of July 2024. Moved by Councillor McDonald, seconded by Councillor Shane.
Thank you. All in favor? Motion's carried, and our adjournment.
Be it resolved that this regular meeting adjourn at 8:25 PM, moved by Councillor Shane, seconded by Councillor McDonald.
Thank you. All in favor? Motion is carried. So I'd like to wish our members of council, people listening into, it is the summer season, so enjoy your holidays. We're only back on the 20th of, so we do have a month, and that goes for staff as well. So enjoy, it looks like it's gonna be a warm summer, so enjoy your holidays, summer days, and we'll see you back in August.